In this documentary, you are going to meet 5 positive women who are part of a support organisation for women and families living with HIV or AIDS.
HIV affects every aspect of your life once you have an HIV diagnosis.
Even after 25 years, people are still thinking that this is a male-related illness, you know, and I think that's why women suffer that little bit extra stigma.
Positive Women are continually raising awareness through education in the community with the focus of preventing the spread of HIV and AIDS.
As difficult as it is to live with a diagnosis like HIV, it is no longer the death sentence it used to be, and I think that is something to really hold on to.
Jane Bruning has been HIV positive for 22 years and is the National Coordinator for Positive Women.
I started in 2004 as the National Coordinator. The primary focus for Positive Women really is around providing support for women and families living with HIV. Good morning, Positive Women. This is Jane Bruning. We have a 0800 phone line so that women from anywhere in the country can call us at any time. We work with other networks so that we refer women to counsellors if that's what they need, or to WINS, or to a social worker. We try and organise workshops like the digital storytelling workshop, which is on our website. You know, it's empowering for the women, but also what we have at the end of that is a tool that we can use for educational purposes. HIV is still kept pretty much under the carpet. There's not enough information about it, and that's the biggest thing that feeds into the whole stigma of HIV.
Like many Kiwis, Jane had a hunger for adventure and in her early 20s travelled overseas, working as a tour guide in Europe and finally ending up in Tanzania in Africa.
Went in 1981 to Tanzania. We ran 2-week safaris around the Serengeti, mostly English and Australian and New Zealand tourists. And it was myself and one other man. He was the driver and I was the cook and the rest of the crew, and sort of 2 weeks on and 1 week off, and did that for a while, and it was a lot of fun. It was an amazing time in my life. Then I met a gorgeous young man, a local man, and fell in love, and we had a child together in 1985.
I was born in Nairobi, but I was actually raised in Tanzania in a town called Arusha, which was awesome. I have just the best memories of childhood ever.
Probably one of the best days of my life, actually, the day my son was born. Hugely proud of my son.
We lived in Arusha, I think, till I was about 5.
Unfortunately, the relationship didn't last. By the time my son was a year old, there was just a lot of cultural differences. By that time, I wasn't able to go on safari anymore because I had my son, and I got a job as the assistant manager, and did that for about 4 years, and met another young man, and we sort of had a very passionate affair for about 6 months. That sort of fizzled out, and then not long after that met another Englishman, and I got a phone call from a very good friend of mine to say that that the guy that I'd been going out with for 6 months had died, and that he had died from salmonella and typhoid, and that he had AIDS. When I lose control, I went to the local hospital and asked somebody if they could do an HIV test. The guy from the laboratory was walking with me, and every step I would take, it was like, am I HIV positive? I'm not. I am. I'm not. And the door opened into this little bare room, and sitting in one of these little plastic chairs was a very, very elderly nun, and she sort of proceeded to tell me about AIDS. So I said, well, have I got AIDS? And she said, yes, I'm afraid to tell you you've got AIDS.
Melinda has recently moved to Auckland to seek out new challenges and increase her voluntary work with Positive Women.
One of the reasons I moved to Auckland was to get more involved with education and awareness around HIV and AIDS.
Melinda has always had a love for the culture and customs of Indonesia. Teaching English as a foreign language enabled Melinda to live in the place she loves.
I guess that the most important job was teaching English as a second language in Indonesia. I was there for 2.5 years. I've also done a lot of support work for people with disabilities. I'd been living in Indonesia at the time. There was an earthquake in Yogyakarta which resulted in me coming home to recover from the trauma. It was only a week before I was due to go back to Indonesia and continue my job and go back to my partner when I went to the doctor for a general checkup, and I just said, check me for everything. I didn't really know what HIV and AIDS was, but I just said that was one of the tests, check me for it. And yeah, that's when I was diagnosed. It was devastating. I mean, I didn't know anything about it. Neither did my mother, who was with me at the time. And I thought I was going to die. I thought, you know, there might be a couple of years left to live. I thought that I had passed it on to my partner. And I thought that I'd never be able to have children or have a family. I called my partner and let him know, and I was afraid that he'd run away and leave me, but he was very supportive of me, and he said he wasn't going anywhere, that he loved me, and I said to him he needed to get a test as fast as possible, which he did. 4 days later he texted me and said that he had a test and that he was fine.
Of course, I was in a relationship at the time, so I had to tell my partner. I sort of started crying and told him, and he actually took it quite well. He sort of looked at me and he said, oh, you know, why the F don't you be careful who you sleep with? And he stormed off and went out and got drunk. But I had to then talk him into going to have a test. He didn't want to. He just sort of thought, oh, well, what's the point? And I said, well, the point is that you may not be positive, even though we've been together for 2 years. So he went for a test, but unfortunately he was.
I have an ex-partner in Bali, and after my diagnosis, I visited him on my way back to Indonesia, and I told him that I'd been diagnosed with HIV. He admitted to me that he was a recovering intravenous drug user when we had broken up, after we broke up. And that's the main reason I think that he is also HIV positive, although he refuses to get tested.
I remember my partner saying, you know, you're no different today than you were yesterday. And I said, yes, I am. I said, yesterday I had the possibility of a lifetime. Today I have maybe 3 years if I'm lucky.
As National Coordinator for Positive Women, Jane knew the only way to educate communities and destigmatise HIV was to go public with her HIV status.
I was trying to sort of raise the profile of the organisation, and everywhere I went, to the media or anywhere, they would say, oh, we don't want to talk to a representative, we want to talk to someone who's positive. And I sort of felt, oh, it's getting in the way, this sort of hiding about HIV. And my son was in his teens by then. He already knew. You know, I sort of talked to him and I said, how do you feel about if I become public about my status? I talked to my family about it, and they were all okay. Came out about my status publicly on breakfast show on World AIDS Day, which was very, very public. And I do remember walking around the first week after that with my head bowed, you know, in the supermarket thinking, oh, you know, everyone's going to say, oh, there's that AIDS lady.
The strength it takes to go public. Mum is just so brave, and she's not an in-your-face kind of woman. She's quiet and she's strong, and I was so proud of her. And if anyone ever talked to me about, oh, your mum's got HIV and had a go, I'd welcome it.
It's Jane's courageous spirit that has encouraged other members to go public with their HIV status.
One of the other main things that we really want to do as part of an organisation is to raise awareness about HIV and that women can be affected. And that was one of the reasons why we did the destigmatisation campaign. And it's about highlighting that anybody can get it, and it's not a certain type. And one of the wonderful things is that the women that took part in this, every single person contracted it a different way.
Meet Marama. Like Jane, she's one brave lady and believes fronting up about your HIV status is the best way to educate others.
Well, there's only 3 ways you can get HIV. By having sex, by blood transfusion or sharing dirty needles, or mother to child through breastfeeding or giving birth. When you've got HIV, you have the virus. It's a human immunodeficiency virus. So the virus is running around in your body, attacking your immune system, and that's what leads into AIDS, which is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. I left school at 88, and it was sort of when the AIDS epidemic had been put in the media, and we had no education at all about it at my school.
One fateful night, Marama's life would take a dramatic turn when she and her family went to see a band at her local nightclub.
And one of the members of the band sort of started showing me a bit of attention. He was from Africa, and I found him alluring, and I let myself be charmed by him. Yeah, it was sort of a one-night thing. And then a couple of weeks later, I got quite ill and I knew something was wrong. And then a few months later, one of my cousins got the Sunday newspaper. He came roaring round to my house because on the front page was a picture of this guy that I had met. The big heading was Face of Fear, and it was his face, and it said that he had infected some woman with HIV, and if you've had contact with this man, please ring this phone number.
Peter Mwai was suspected of having unprotected sex with 5 women, whilst knowing he was HIV positive.
Will you help us stop this guy from infecting any other woman? And I said, sure, you know, hoping to God that I wasn't going to be infected. And then they told me I had about 8 to 10 years to live. And I just wanted my mum. When I asked about having children, they said there's a very high chance of passing the virus on to children. I still remember the pain as if it was yesterday. It was just such a huge shock. And like being Māori too, it was really important for me to have a family, have children.